Yeah, we're in a weird space where on the one hand side, AI offers opportunities for consultancies because our clients are asking, okay, what should we be doing? How do we get from pilot to scale? What should we be implementing? How do we drive change? I think it's that human element of actually going beyond the PowerPoint deck and a strategy to actually getting them on the road to implementation.
Welcome to another episode of Advising the Advisors, the AIinConsulting Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Bolu. And today, we're going to be diving into the transformative power of AI and digital innovation in consulting and life sciences. AI isn't just changing how companies operate, it's fundamentally redefining how pharma companies engage with healthcare providers, patients, and how consulting firms build long-term strategies for their clients. The big question is, how can companies move forward beyond pilots and experimenting with AI to create lasting business impact? To help unpack this, today I have Ben Glatz joining me, a partner at Kearney, where he specializes in digital transformation and commercial strategy. With over 15 years of experience across industries, including energy, retail, and life sciences, Ben has guided global companies through disruption, helping them build innovative customer engagement models and leverage AI and data-driven insights to achieve sustainable growth. Well, thanks for joining me, Ben.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
In this conversation, we'll explore how AI is reshaping personalized medicine, the critical role of predictive analytics in healthcare, and how consulting firms can help clients scale AI solutions that deliver real value. Okay, so before we jump into the serious stuff very quickly, so I hear you're a black coffee drinker, Ben.
Yeah.
What's your go-to brew here? Are you more of an espresso person or prefer a classic pour over?
I used to probably be more opinionated about it. Now I'm probably a little bit more laissez-faire. But yeah, my go-to is probably like a black Americano in various sizes. But I'll take a pour over sometimes. Espressos I tend to go to after meals, and then also like Italy or places like that where it's just the done thing. Yeah.
When and why did you stop caring as much about the coffee?
I think it became apparent to me that, there's a certain level of quality I like in a coffee, and but yeah, I just don't think it's that important to me overall of, the exact grams and time it takes to pour, etc. I've not found. Maybe it's my taste buds don't differentiate enough.
Okay, well, with that, let's dive right in. So the myth busting segment, we call this. So one of the biggest myths about like AI disruption is that it will completely replace traditional consulting practices and human expertise, making many roles become redundant. Where do you see the biggest misconceptions here about AI's impact in consulting? And I guess maybe if you like move into life sciences as well, in particular.
Yeah, I do think it will fundamentally reshape consulting, and I think over the next few years we are going to see some shifts, but I don't think it's going to do away from it, right? The core elements of what consulting helps organizations with in terms of either providing, urgent capacity or capabilities that are needed for a period of time that organizations can't find themselves. And especially in an area like AI that's moving so rapidly, I think that's going to continue. But I do think consultancies, just like clients, will, find certain routine tasks, routine jobs, perhaps disappearing, perhaps being, or not disappearing entirely, but perhaps becoming augmented, driving more automation, etc., and therefore also becoming more efficient. I think for consultancies, just like for all other industries, we then need to think about, okay, how do we develop our talent compared to our current model, which is obviously you come in sort of as a junior and you learn and, you drive apprenticeship and sort of you go through the ranks. When perhaps what you're learning at a entry level changes fundamentally towards, you might not be building those models anymore. You might not be, exposed to the analysis in the same way. So how can you ask the right question to an LLM and or advise clients if perhaps you haven't been through that rigor in terms of analysis? And that's something that I think we need to figure out.
So how can companies rethink like AI as a tool for collaboration and augmentation, like as against just replacement? Like how do you have any ideas about how like the collaborative like aspects of it could almost like more co-pilot as against employee replacement? Do you have any thoughts on that model?
Yeah, there's huge benefits, right? What we already see, whether it's having AI tools that transcribe meetings or support those elements, note taking that everybody has access to. Perhaps leveraging it to search knowledge bases and intellectual capital more easily and surface that. and therefore then also be able to contact, especially in larger organizations, the people behind that, right? I think we're quite lucky in Kearney that we're in the size where a lot of people are still, where you know a lot of people by virtue of interactions, and therefore you always know who to go to. But actually, as you get bigger, and also there is pockets of expertise and knowledge that you just don't know about, and I think that's also an area where I can help.
Okay, so quick tactical advice I hope again for our listeners is, you mentioned an example of again being intentional and focused as to like the outcome that you want the AI to have, again, whether it's like in drive revenue, whether it's like increase this or that. So like again, tactically, like what does that look like? Does that mean, again, if you have an opportunity to pilot something, you take more of a depth first approach as against breadth? That is like give 10 departments, like go play with it for a while and then see where like the seeds are bearing fruit? Or do you just go deep first? Like that's like have strong opinions, top down, this department, I want to see like what comes off that. Or is department like, again, the wrong abstraction even to think of it?
It's a really good question. It depends a little bit, typical consulting answer, it depends a little bit on the organization, how they operate. What we're seeing that's also holding back scale is actually that a lot of these pilots and POCs are driven in silos within the organization, within divisional and functional silos. And therefore they actually don't scale, and therefore they also don't drive value. So that's where the top-down view needs to come in terms of, okay, what am I really trying to achieve? The bottom-up enablement in terms of you can still play, you need to be allowing people to get access to the tool so they get familiar with it, so they create innovation internally. But I think in terms of where real investment for scaling comes, that needs to be really clear on what we do and what we don't do. Not least given how rapid AI is evolving, therefore also how rapidly we see the costs decrease. So you could be spending a tremendous amount of money on trying to scale something, but there are ROIs in there right now, or not within the, let's say within 12 months. Whereas if you wait 12 months and focus on scaling it somewhere else where it's already proven, the cost decrease will then enable you to go after the next piece. And I think that's where the top-down strategy element comes in, with the bottom-up in terms of innovation and take-up.
I like that. And so on the point on, you mentioned a very good point about, again, like these models are getting cheaper. I think like, again, each subsequent like release has like, again, 2 orders of magnitude drops.
I mean, we've just seen the controversy around DeepSeek. Still figuring that out. But even if you take that out of the equation, I think, we can look at, Moore's law still exists, but actually a lot of people believe even that's going to accelerate, right?
Yeah, exactly. Coming closer to home in consulting, how do you, again, like down to the particulars in this case, since you do know like the obviously like not speaking for Kearney, but just in the abstract of like consulting in general itself, what do you think, again, like you gave like perfect frameworks, like maybe let's just like get to like the particulars in those frameworks as to like what are competencies, what is like our unique position to our unique like value to contribute. Again, thinking again of a consulting firm in the abstract that again has just enough resources to also build this internally, and also again enough sophistication to engage with partners externally as well.
And there's probably, depending on the type of consultancy, different answers, right? Like if I think,
like a strategy consultant.
Yeah, the strategy consultants. I mean, there are certain things that are probably no-brainers, in terms of, as I said, knowledge management and surfacing that and analyzing that. Some of the acceleration in terms of creating, being able to create pitch decks faster or outputs faster, run analysis. Because I think there is a lot of things that we do that we repeat. And some of it is already, if I think about some of the macros many consultancies have built into their PowerPoints or into their Excels, etc., and templates to make that faster. These are no-brainers for where I can help even more, and also actually serve and augment consultants to suggest things. The second element is actually enabling, questioning and ideations when, we often, and rightly so, get asked and get tasked with challenges and problems that other people haven't solved before. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask it. If it was easy, you wouldn't need consultants. And then even then, right, we get good brains in the room, we get external advisors potentially, and we try to come up with innovative and creative solutions that are very often bespoke to organizations because of their situation. And actually, I don't think a GPT-4 can give you the perfect answer there. But it can perhaps, especially more junior consultants that haven't had as much exposure and experience, it can give them a starting point to accelerate their thinking. And the flip side is, I think for more senior and experienced consultants, there is also a huge amount of just efficiency in terms of drafting emails, taking care of notes, building it into the workflow from a diary management perspective through to obviously all the back office. So just like any other organization, we've got back office functions that can be automated or driven more efficiently. What we're looking at from a Kearney perspective, but certainly when I look at where others in our space are operating, that's certainly where a lot of organizations are already investing. And then, I look at what our clients are doing. They also have access to the same tools. They're also not standing still. So actually, it's then about thinking, okay, well, if my client is able to leverage GPT-4 and or whatever in-house tools they may have to do certain types of things, they will not ask me to do that anymore. That means, what do I need to do to differentiate, to level up? And or how does that change also our value proposition and the type of work we do?
What is your current, again, obviously this is all evolving in real time as a but what's your current position on that?
Yeah, we're in a weird space where on the one hand side, AI offers opportunities for consultancies because our clients are asking, okay, what should we be doing? How do we get from pilot to scale? What should we be implementing? How do we drive change? I think it's that human element of actually going beyond the PowerPoint deck, going beyond a strategy to actually implement, getting them on the road to implementation. And that change element is going to become to some extent more important. If I think about, and this is a personal view, if I think about AI in general and the types of jobs it's disrupting, or, when we think about which jobs are technically potentially could go away or required less of, most of these are office-based, thought-based jobs. They're not physical jobs, right? Okay, fine, driverless cars is a different story, but, at the same time, I'd still want to go to a coffee shop and have a personal interaction. I don't really want to just press a button.
You hinted at something very quickly as to the different dynamics and more tenure as to how AI drives impact internally, i.e. more junior analysts versus more senior partners, kind of like yourself. An interesting analogy I came across is kind of inverting the pyramid versus slimming the pyramid. Again, I'll explain. As AI again kind of level the playing field for more junior associates. Again, you mentioned the knowledge-based use case where, again, as a junior associate, I could ask very quickly, hey, what are all the projects we've done on in this very niche area? Right? Again, this is something, someone like yourself would only be able to answer from actually being on the ground. But again, if AI tells you, hey, this is all we've worked on over the last 10 years, again, that's kind of level the playing field, if you will, as to the knowledge they don't have. And of course, for the more senior partners and consultants as well, there is, again, kind of the back office tasks that they would require an army of analysts on the base of the pyramid to help them with. So those are the two models. Which of these two dynamics, again, do you think or would it be most impactful? Value concentrating at the top as partners need less analysts in the base, or leveling up in the sense of analysts are now more empowered to go deliver high level value so quickly? And again, as which of these two models is more stable?
No, it's a really good thought experiment, and it's one I think that we're all grappling with, because there's also business economics behind the organization behind it. If we play the thought experiment of partners at the top and no more analysts, at what point are there no more? Do we run out of partners and they will retire? And the economic structure and different, depending business, whether it's equity partnerships or others. How does that work, right? Our business is built and has been for generations built on the core has always been the quality of our people and also the continued success of our people that rise to the top and continue to take firms to the next level and continue to grow and deliver, right? So if you take that, if you start sort of taking layers out at the bottom, where do future partners come from? And I think that's one thing that we need to be clear on, and I don't think we've fully understood it. I think there is an element of the pyramid may change. The crucial element for me, and it goes back to what I was sort of alluding to, is, okay, well, if we can sort of arm our analysts, associates, managers with these tools and augment them and make them more effective and more productive, how do we still ensure they ask the right questions of those tools? Because that, for me, is the critical element. And then interrogate and critically think about the outputs. Just because, the model spits out the 10 best projects that we've done on that topic doesn't necessarily mean that's the right answer for that client in that situation. And that judgment element is still one that requires, a level of experience, a level of, I guess, apprenticeship, as we call it. And sometimes it is just a judgment call, right? Looking at everything that's in the mix. Enabling that is going to be critical, I think, as we build that out and enable our very smart and bright young talent to potentially do more and more interesting stuff.
Okay, so quick segue to, I guess you mentioned before how, again, in the mobile era, like everything was meant to be an app and whatnot. Just like happy to like hear like your commentary again over like the last 15 years. You've seen so many like hype and excitement cycles of like technology from the mobile, like you mentioned, also like to IoT as well. I feel like that's a bit of a thing you were active with as well with that. Yeah, so happy to like hear, what do you think, is this time different? Let's just put it like that. And how is this time different with AI, if you will? And how does it like compare to kind of like the failure cases you've seen happen across the different cycles?
Yeah, I think it is different to IoT, for example. I mean, if I think in my lifetime and to some extent my work time, although I wasn't in work during the dot-com boom, but if you think back to the 90s, obviously web generated a huge amount of excitement. Initially, people were like, "Oh, what is this? Why would I need a website for?" I think when email first launched, everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is going to make us so much more productive." And now probably it's having the opposite impact. Or just so many emails, right? And the expectation that you answer so quickly, and you probably limit the amount of time you allow people to think through stuff. Then we go into the noughties and mobile, and I think a prime example of somebody who missed that opportunity were the telcos, when they just became dumb pipes because they thought they could just own it rather than play in the ecosystem. I think there was a hype and everybody thought they needed an app, and a lot of money was wasted. A lot of money was wasted during the web era. IoT, by virtue of where it was targeted, more in the industrial space, etc., it still has a value, and even more so with AI, I would argue, and in terms of operating more efficiently and lights out factories potentially. It was never that widely consumer adopted. And now you look at it and people are using, LLMs in their personal life, just like they were using mobile devices for their personal life and mobile apps for their personal life. And I think when it takes hold of that, it then is very, very difficult, then it becomes, I guess, democratized to an extent, but also it becomes an expectation. And that's what they also get access to in the work environment. And that accelerates change because it also creates new B2C opportunities. It creates new business models. So I think the hype is real.
Your career has taken you across different industries, from working at Shell, Deloitte, Accenture, as you mentioned, before joining Kearney. Like, how do you think like those experiences, again, like you were the one like receiving the advice, if you will, like you were also like executing on all that, I imagine. Yeah, how do you think back on that time, and like how much of like learnings did you take with you, again, from being the one practicing to giving the counsel and advice now on as a consultant today?
Yeah, I think for me, I made a very conscious choice of going back into industry after several years in consulting initially. Part of it was because I wanted to practice what I preach. I wanted to see if I could actually do it. And yeah, I learned, I took a lot of it away from me. You get more empathy for your clients of how hard it is to sometimes move things along in a large, complex corporate environment. At the same time, I think, having had previous consulting experience, I think I was a more informed and better buyer of consulting services when I was a client than I would have been otherwise.
Okay, very quickly, again, we're in closing questions territory here. But what do you think has and hasn't changed post-AI in your given advice every day? Like, what has stayed the same? Let's start there. The kind of advice you give, and how you give advice even, just like any direction you want to take a question.
What stayed the same? I think it's still a deeply human job, right? And actually listening and understanding the human element of our is still critical, if not maybe more critical than it has been, right? Kearney is built on a principle from our founder, which is we talk about a lot, which is essential rightness, and we believe that in the essential rightness of our advice, or our success is driven by the essential rightness of the advice we give. There's a second sentence that sometimes gets forgotten or not mentioned, which is around also our ability to convince those in power to make the decisions to believe that our advice is right. And naturally that comes with the data, the analysis, the rigor, but it comes also with the human element of building trusted advisor relationships with clients at all levels. And I think that starts as an analyst and your counterpart on a project all the way up to partner level. And so for me, that hasn't changed.
That's interesting. Just to double tap on that. So say that back to you. So you're saying like it's necessary that you're right, but like it's not enough just to be right. Like you have a sense of responsibility to make sure that the person in the position to like take that advice does take it.
Yeah, that they understand that it is the right advice, and then they're willing to take it from you. And that takes a different type of approach, sometimes a different conversation to just having, the best analysis and the best. That is almost, to some extent table stakes in the type of work we do. And then it's, okay, what else?
Interesting. Okay. So that has not changed. What has, you think, the most?
I think the pace, things get faster and continue to get faster. For us, there will be a continuous challenge of how do we stay ahead in this massive, rapid changing environment. Do you then, on the one hand side, become even more specialized, as some people do, in particular sub areas, or take the other route and become more of a connector and join the dots? And I think there's probably roles for both. You need to continue sort of to be T-shaped and find the time between delivering rapidly for your clients and also find the time to still, innovate and stay ahead and see what else is going on and lift your head above the parapet. You
mentioned kind of this like glorious future of kind of AI contributing, like speeding up the cycles for everything from like drug discovery. Like you spoke about the pipeline. What do you have to say about, again, like you mentioned like kind of like the mining companies, for example, like still being like grounded in reality. Like what do you say to like the bottlenecks to like what would it mean? Like everything from, again, like some like the physical sciences, but also like to the regulatory constraints as well. Like how much of that do you think will then become the tiniest bottlenecks, and therefore like we don't get this glorious future, if you will, in healthcare in particular?
I think AI has a role to play on both ends, right? I think AI also has the huge potential to actually act as to check itself. And I think, training models to check their own, like competing models to check their own homework with human oversight, I think is critical. It's similar, as I said, on the regulatory element. So actually looking at, okay, if we do have drugs that are designed rather than discovered, and, to some extent potentially accelerate or skip certain elements in the development life cycle, understanding exactly what's behind that. And I think that transparency behind the discovery, behind the technology is critical. And I think that similarly then potentially requires regulatory bodies to also have tool sets to interrogate and check, especially if there is more and more data and more innovation happening. So I think that's one element. We think bottleneck, having worked in sort of the energy sector and with that in the mobility space by extension, probably even 10 years ago, we looked at self-driving cars and the different business models and how that may play out. And the biggest challenge there is probably regulatory and insurance, etc.
How about like at work? So like, again, like which of these use cases are you most excited about for AI today?
I think some of the people I help or trying to help with the transformation program I led is back in. So this was previously when I worked at Shell, and that work, that work about work. So stripping out some of the needless, or I say needless, but some of the more administrative, simple process-driven tasks that can take a lot of time. In any organization, there is things from forecasting to finance to reporting to where I think there is a huge amount of potential, and that's where we're already starting to see some. As I said, knowledge management and search and that kind of stuff. I think just those things that take time in your day are parts of it. And then the other stuff I think, is how can we really leverage it to, on the one hand side, bring core capabilities that we have and expertise that we've built over many, many years and experience. And I think that's where some custom models could be interesting.
How so? Like, how's it different from the knowledge management use case of just like leveraging past assets you've made?
So I think, as any consultancy, right, I think we've got certain strengths and particular areas of focus. I think in Kearney's strategic operations world, I think there's a huge amount of core human knowledge as well that we have, as well as written down knowledge. And if we can combine the two to almost, to create agents, as it were, that we can leverage or potentially even license, I think that could be an interesting avenue. Same is true for any other consultancy, right? Whether that's on pricing strategy and pricing models or things like that. But no, I think it's more how can we really leverage the tools to augment and be creative and come and test and sort of engage beyond just the efficiency play. But I think the efficiency play for me is super interesting because I think it will unlock better even better work for our clients, I should say, and more value for our clients in terms of the solutions we enable and deliver, and that crucially that human time for that human element.
I mean, for us, obviously, you have the context as to what we're working on here at AIinConsulting. Basically, again, helping consultants leverage their institutional knowledge. Speaking to like the pyramid structure there, as to again like the dynamics between junior and senior consultants here is, so we have a feature. There's a new capability we unlocked in the product recently, which is basically expert search. That's like, again, finding internal experts, like you mentioned early in conversation. And the interesting thing is every time we deploy that is how surprised people are at the responses. Because again, like for example, if you ask like who are the experts at Kearney for like healthcare or something, you'd come up, right? But to be fair, you get that information from Google, right? Because again, like you're a well-known partner. But something we've seen that's why surprises some of our deployments is that they get to see, again, not just like the most obvious like leaders, but also those that are rising, to your point, right? So again, like, meaning, and why that is possible from a technical perspective is we build this like knowledge graph, if you will, of contributions based on like looking like at granular documents. So like this PowerPoint presentation we did, like who are like the 5 contributors to it. And it turns out if you build a kind of like, like Google's PageRank, if you will, if you build a PageRank of expertise, and this way, like from the bottom up as against top down, you get to see like interesting, it turns out like this person who's been here for like 2-3 years, just like out of uni, knows quite a bit about this.
Yeah,
like one
esoteric thing. On like 3 different proposals or projects on that topic.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. Again, is the thing like we couldn't have known like a priori. Like we just thought like, oh, it would just like bring the usual suspects for like leaders in the role. But it turns out like, the bottom up contribution thing is a non-obvious delightful thing that again some of our partners have been impressed with. So yeah, that's yeah. So we call it like PageRank indexing for expertise.
For expertise, yeah, that's an interesting use case. Yeah, and that network mapping as well in terms of who people engage with and collaborate with, I think, is sometimes not always obvious. No, I think there's lots of potential. The one question you didn't ask me, I think that we were going to talk about is who I'd like to have my coffee with. The reason I'm bringing it up because I really struggled.
Okay. And again, for the benefit of everyone listening, there was a question that we had before, which is if you were to have a coffee with anyone, again, like dead or alive, AI expert, or again, across any industry, like musician, jazz musician, anything.
Well, I was sort of thinking about tech and business leaders. And I mean, there was a few obvious ones from, Warren Buffett, Jobs, Ray Dalio, obviously all the leaders around DeepMind and isomorphic and those things. But actually, I landed on Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn and PayPal and everything else. I don't know why, but I'd really enjoy it. I think I'd really love spending, a little bit of time having a coffee with him. I love his podcast, Masters of Scale. I think he has some real deep insight that is broader than singular expertise and just tech. So yeah, I think he would be a fascinating person to have a coffee with, as would many, many others. But yeah, that's where I landed, for better or for worse.
That's an interesting one. And of course, like Masters of Scale is obviously like about like startups and technology and whatnot. Like what kind of question would you ask him? Would he be about, again, like that? Like again, the tech startup end of it, or anything else?
I think it'd be more the system, on the edge of that. I think the two things that other things that fascinate me and that I get to explore as part of working with different organizations is what makes organizations really successful and, creates high performing cultures. So corporate cultures, high performing teams, etc. And I think, the scale ups, and then that the next step from there is an interesting one that he touches on in a variety of spaces. So I think that, but I think more the broader, I guess, societal, philosophical questions around technology and the impact it has on both positive and potential negative that it can have on our society. I think he'd be an interesting person to talk to about.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. Well, this has been lovely. Thanks a lot, Ben. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming over.